Hey, Chris.
Hi, Ashley.
How are you today?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing well, thank you. I'm just getting us set up for all of our viewers. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Looks like we have quite a few attendees, so thank you everybody for joining. Just so you guys know, right now you are on mute, and we will bring you off at a later point in time for a Q&A. All right.
Oh, looks like it's 2 o'clock.
It is. We are just going live with our Facebook, so bear with me one second, guys, while we get that started so that we can have more viewers join.
Ashley, where are you located?
I am in New Jersey right now. Where are you? Are you on a trip?
I'm in the middle of a trip. I'm in Fort Lauderdale at Pompano Beach. It is a absolutely gorgeous day here.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for the first of a series of webinars titled ATP Ride Reports, similar to pilots and air traffic controllers um, working together to solicit and disseminate pilot weather reports or ride reports on meteorological conditions encountered in flight. We will be hosting webinars to provide you with information regarding aviation careers and current outlook on the industry as a whole. My name is Ashley Pilon. I handle the tuition reimbursement programs and alumni services for ATP Flight School. For those of you that are exploring the option of attending, we are the largest domestic provider of flight training with 41 locations nationwide and a fleet of almost 400 aircraft. We offer a fast track airline career pilot program that allows a pilot to proceed from zero experience through CFIs in a period of as little as 9 months, and that's 6 months if you're already a private pilot. Today, we will be joined by United Airlines Captain and Airline Pilot Life contributor Chris Carey to discuss the long-term outlook of the aviation industry amidst uncertainty. Some housekeeping before we get started. Your microphones are muted right now, and they will be for the earlier portion of this session. Feel free to utilize the chat box to communicate with us at any point if we need to slow down or speak up at any point. Chris, it does look like Tori says hi to you right now already. So,
Yes. Hi,
perfect.
Tori.
All right. And we will leave a few minutes at the end of this webinar to allow for a Q&A. Feel free to type any questions that you have in that chat box, and there is a separate one for Q&A. It looks like we have one already, so thank you so much. And finally, before we get started, I'm just going to bring up a poll right now, and we're going to find out a little bit of experience about you and your current level of flight experience. So while we launch this, we'll give you about 30 seconds to go ahead and vote on that.
I see Jason saying hello from New Jersey. So I am Newark based. So Jersey's definitely part of my life. So welcome back to New Jersey. Welcome to those in Jersey.
Yeah, it's not a bad day here today, but I'm sure it's nothing like Fort Lauderdale.
Jamaica. That's impressive. Somebody saying hi from Jamaica.
And India. Okay,
Wow.
so we have all over. All right, so it looks like right now we have private pilot just getting started. We'll give you guys about 10 more seconds to go ahead and answer those questions. Los Angeles, hey, LA, New York, okay, Connecticut. We have, thank you, everyone. Welcome from all over.
Well, thank you for saying hi, everybody. I actually lived on Long Island for a few years too, so I don't know what part of New York you're from, but also another place I really love.
Right, so we're going to go ahead and end the polling. It looks like the majority of you are either just getting started or are private pilots. So welcome to you. I do see a couple names that we recognize too on this list. So welcome to those of you that are current students and instructors and alumni. We're so happy to have all of you, and welcome, Chris. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So I think to get started, we'd just like to find out a little bit about your background and what got you into the aviation industry.
Well, I've been in the airlines since 2013 is when I began. But I'm sorry, since 2005. But my family has been in the industry since 1940. Both my grandfathers were TWA pilots, and my father was a U.S. Airways pilot. He's since retired. And I decided I wanted to go down a different path. I wanted to become work in business administration, have that sort of job. And I got about halfway through my education, through my marketing degree, which I did finish. And I realized this just isn't for me. I think the rest of my family has it right. And I went out, I took an intro flight at a local flight school, and I was absolutely hooked. And from there on, I went ahead and finished the degree. And while I was finishing the degree, I got my private at a field in Chesapeake, Virginia, CPK. And that it was a little tough, I'll be honest, going to college full time and trying to get a private pilot's license. It took a little bit of time, but I got it done. And then when I finished, at that point, I knew for sure I wanted to be a professional pilot. And I'd had a cousin that had gone to ATP. So I called him and said, hey, Mike, what was your experience like? And he told me he had a positive experience. So I did my own research too and called up, signed up for ATP, went through the program. And then I was lucky to stay as an instructor. I instructed there for about a year. So that was 2004 and 2005. And then went to ExpressJet. The ExpressJet at the time was primarily Continental Express operations. And I was there for 2 years. Right when I was about to hold captain at ExpressJet, I got picked up by Continental Airlines. So a lot of hard work, with some luck thrown in there too, to get hired so quickly at a major, and very lucky. But of course, Continental became United in 2010 is when the financial merger happened, and I've been there since. In the 13 years I've been at Continental and United, I've been very lucky. I've flown the 737, the 757, the 767, and now I'm a captain on the Airbus 320 and 319s. And with flying all those various aircraft, I've had quite a bit of domestic experience, but also Central and South America and a lot of European experience too. So I've been very lucky that I've got to see the world and gotten paid to do it. So it's been a great experience.
Very good. Now, we do have a question from one of our attendees. Is a graduate degree beneficial if I aim to become a commercial pilot?
A graduate degree. Yeah, it's certainly not going to hurt. However, the major airlines want to see an undergraduate degree. And really, if you have that, you've checked the requirement. A graduate degree is certainly an extra bonus on top of that, but it's not going to push you over the edge. The airlines are looking for flight time and experience. So it's great that you have it, but yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, then with regard to the aviation industry, have you ever experienced anything, a situation similar to what we're seeing right now with COVID-19 before?
Yes and no. So I mentioned I was hired at the majors in 2007. And then right after that, in 2008, the housing bubble burst. And with that, we had the recession that came. That was interesting in that was also coupled with the FAA changing the pilot mandatory retirement age from 60 to 65. So in addition to a recession where the airlines kind of contracted a little bit, we also had nobody retire for 5 years. So there wasn't a lot of growth in the industry, particularly on the airline side. I moved up maybe 30 numbers in 5 years. So the industry struggled a little bit on that, but in the next year, in 2009, we saw things start to turn around, and then by 2010, it was going well, and the airlines were starting to hire again.
Okay, we have another question. What would you prefer? I mean, this will be, you have an answer for this, you have experience, flying at a university or going to ATP right out of high school?
But there's more options than just that. We recommend people go to college, get a degree in something other than aviation, and then come back and get your flight training from an accelerated program. That gives you something to fall back on if you need to do that. And just gives you more experience. Also, bear in mind that the airline's looking for a certain age too. So to me, I would wait. I wouldn't go right out of high school to flight train.
And we actually had a follow-up question related to that. What do you think of commercial aviation as a second career? So when did you start, and is there an age limit?
Well, there is age 65, which I talked about for airline pilots. Now, we do see in the Part 91 world and some of the other divisions of aviation that age can go on, and people fly later than that. But we have a lot of second career people. We see that quite a bit. And when we get later on, we're going to talk about a website that we have some mentors on, and one of my favorite. Well, we only have two; they're both my favorites. But Adam is a second career guy, so that'll be a great topic when we get to that. So
perfect. And then, so how did that impact with everything that's happening right now and the mandatory retirement that you talked about? How did that impact new pilots that are entering the industry?
Well, so it's interesting when things contracted a little bit and there was a pause in the hiring in the airline industry. I was involved in another website back then offering mentoring, and we saw people go one of two ways. Either people would say, "Hey, things don't look absolutely perfectly rosy right now. I'm going to wait. I want to pause my training, and when everything turns around, I'll get into it." And to an extent, I understand that logic. I get wanting to have a really defined path. However, we also saw people that say, "Hey, this is my dream. I want to be an airline pilot. I'm going to make this happen. I know it's going to turn around. It always does." And those people started their training right then, in 2008. And what's interesting is when the airlines started hiring again, guess who got hired first? Guess who's a captain now? Who's at a major now? The people that went ahead, started their training, knowing things are going to turn around, like they always do. They're the ones that they have far more seniority now than those who waited.
Okay. And if I were a prospective pilot about to start flight training, what can you share about the future of job opportunities?
Actually, we had a graph we were looking at earlier. Can you pull that up for me, please? So we mentioned that, thank you. The FAA has a mandatory retirement age of age 65. That means you can't fly a day past that. So most people actually retire a few days before because the airlines are afraid of letting you go over it. So if you look at this chart, this shows pilot retirements at American, Delta, and United. So just the big three. So this is leaving out FedEx, Southwest, Spirit. It's leaving out quite a few. But just look at this here. And the chart starts at 2015. And you see for American and Delta, about 200, maybe 175 retirements. And then look to 2020, right, almost in the middle of the chart there. See about 450 pilots a year retiring from these airlines. That's 1,500 pilots a year just from the big three. Move on a couple more years here. We're seeing almost 900 pilots a year at, I believe that's Delta there. And I know American is not far behind them at all. That's just those three. I just read an article from AOPA, and we'll talk about them as a resource, the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. It says right now about 2,000 airline pilots are going to retire every year right now, trending towards 3,000 a year in just the next few years. Doesn't really sound like a lot, but you've got to remember there's only about 90 to 100,000 airline pilots in the entire country. So we're talking about a very large turnover in the industry and a pilot shortage that is still driving. It's that the seats are going to need to be filled in the future.
Thank you. And so can you explain a little bit to our viewers about how seniority matters, especially amid economic change?
Absolutely. In seniority, we touched on a little bit earlier. Let's define what seniority is. It's in the airlines, everything is driven by what we call seniority, which turns into when you were hired at the airlines. The person that was hired the longest to go, that's been at the airline the longest, they're the most senior person. They're number one at the airline. Typically somebody that's nearing the end of their career. All the way down to the person who was just the most recently hired, they're the most junior person. And then there's everybody in the middle as according to when they were hired. That seniority determines everything about your quality of life at an airline, from what kind of aircraft you're able to fly, whether you're able to be a captain or a first officer on it, your schedules, the destinations you go to, even when you get vacation. If you have Christmas at home with the kids or you're out on the road, it's all determined by seniority. So it's one of the things on my mentorship we like to talk about is seniority is everything. It's important to get to the airlines as quickly as possible. If you know that's your goal, if you know you want to be an airline pilot, find a path that's quick, sufficient, and of course cost effective to get you there, because even 6 months to a year's difference in seniority can be huge over the course of a career. It can be hundreds of thousands of dollars, the difference between upgrading now and maybe waiting 3 or 4 years to upgrade to captain. Does that answer that for you?
That's perfect. Thank you. And I'm sure that another thing that a lot of our viewers are interested to hear, how has dealing with this past month with COVID-19 changed just your overall daily experience working as a pilot?
It's been really interesting. It's certainly an unprecedented time for the industry. We've seen cancellations like I've never seen before, and certainly empty airplanes like I've never seen either. What's interesting now is as the airlines have kind of figured out what's happening, we're canceling more flights, whereas 3 or 4 weeks ago we were flying empty flights. Now they're doing the proactive cancellations, which I think is really smart. There's no reason to spend money and burn fuel to fly airplanes around that aren't that full. But more importantly, we're still operating, we're still connecting people, flying a lot of medical supplies around. We at United just announced we're doing, I think it's 40 cargo flights a week, I believe it is, all cargo. That's new to us. We're not a cargo airline. But so we're filling a need that wasn't out there before. As far as the customers, what's been really interesting to see is we always try to take pride in having clean airplanes and a clean experience for our customers. But man, they've really doubled down on that. I've never seen the airplane so clean in my life. And they're looking at being able to fog the airplanes in between each flight to get rid of any source of this virus, and spacing people out when we have the space to do it. Just everything we can to make sure that our customers are having as safe as experience as possible. The other thing that's been interesting from an employee perspective is, there's always divisions in work groups at any company, really. I mean, for the most part, we get along fine, but there's always that slight, like, oh, you're a pilot, you're a mechanic, that kind of thing. It's been really nice to see everybody kind of come together and realize, yeah, this is a challenge that's facing us, and it's a significant one. And to know that if we all work together, we're going to come out the other side of this. This is going to turn around. We're all going to come out, but we need to work together now. And it's been really nice to see that kind of feeling amongst all the employees that, hey, we're in this together.
And for some of these pilots that are joining us that are just maybe starting out in their aviation career, which it did look like from the poll a good number were, what are some resources that you would recommend for the earlier stages of becoming a pilot?
Sure. Could you pull up Airline Pilot Life, please? This is my favorite website because I'm part of it. It's a free website it's sponsored by ATP. It's www.airlinepilot.life. But it's completely free for anybody to go on and join. And it's me and Tori, who we mentioned earlier. He's a captain at Horizon. And then Adam, who is a captain at Hawaiian Airlines. And you can come on, you can post any question you want. And we get all sorts of stuff from what's your schedule like? Tell me about a flight where you've experienced an emergency, just anything you can think of. And questions about flight training. And you'll get an answer from one or probably all three of us. And it's a really unique way for you as a potential pilot to come on and engage with current airline pilots. And I want to go through this list here of categories in just a second. But what is also, I think, really neat about this website is we have a lot of current students and even instructors that are going through ATP's program, and people from other flight schools too. Most of them tend to be from ATP's programs that will post their experiences and what they're doing and how their methods for studying for certain tests. And it's really neat to see people that are actively flight training coming together and discussing it. So if you take a look at the website, the top one, frequently asked questions, that's self-explanatory. I would tell people, don't skip over that. There's a lot of great information in there. We put them there because we got to ask these questions all the time. And it's just a great way to give a real thorough answer. Where most of the discussion happens is going to be in airline pilot questions and answers. Anything you can think of, put it in there. ATP emissions, that's obvious if you have questions more about ATP. My favorite section is student experiences. And that's really neat because we don't edit that. That's students that are going through, they come, they give us the good, the bad, and the ugly. Most of the time it's the good, we like that. But they share their experiences, it's unedited, and you can see what a real customer going through ATP's programs is experiencing. Flying the line, I think it skipped over a little bit, and I wish it didn't because there's some really nice kind of essays about flying in there. And then the last one is schedules. So well, not the last, but go on there and you can take a look. We all post our schedules, and you can see everywhere I've been in February. I guess I need to get March up there now. It's really interesting. So you can say, hey, how much am I going to be on the road if I'm a pilot? Because that's a question that we get asked a lot is, what's the family life like? What's my ability to maintain relationships outside of the job? So check that out. It is, another cool thing. It's a way if you guys have questions after this, or if you're watching it on a recorded session, come join on here. You can ask me whatever questions you didn't get asked today, and me and Adam and Tori would be happy to answer those for you. Can you pull up AOPA's website, please? There you go. AOPA, Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. They're a great association. It's pretty inexpensive to join. It's meant for pilots that are in the general aviation world, and they have all sorts of things like on training and safety, learning to fly, online learning, kind of basics, kind of intro into what it takes to be a pilot. Their goal is to get as many pilots as there are out there. Medical questions that under pilot resources, a lot of people come and ask us medical questions, and it's not something we're qualified to answer. These guys are. So they would be able to help answer those. It's a fantastic resource. If we go to the FAA's website, please. You wouldn't think it, but the FAA publishes a lot of their manuals online completely for free. So if you, here you go, the Airplane Flying Handbook. It's really kind of one of the basic books, but it's a great introduction. It's got some great graphics. It's just something to look at. I will tell you guys, if you're a prospective pilot and you're looking at this, it's going to seem overwhelming. If I picked up an intro to a law book, I would be overwhelmed. Don't let that phase you. That's why you go through a training program. That's why you have flight instructors to explain this stuff to you. But it's just a good idea. Just go on and browse that, see if you want to look into it. And then my favorite book is the Jeppesen Private Pilot Manual. It's on Amazon. It's on a lot of different places. This is kind of the Bible of becoming a pilot. It's great resources in there. It's pretty inexpensive to buy. So I think that's one of my favorites. But as always, feel free to ask us questions on Airline Pilot Life.
And if you had one piece of advice that you were to impart on our viewers today, what would it be?
Right now it's a turbulent time for the airline industry. I mean, there's with the COVID-19 and the effect it's had on us, and of course the broader economy. There's a lot of talk of airline bailouts. It's easy to kind of get lost in that and say, okay, maybe I shouldn't be a pilot. Hey guys, this is temporary. We're going to come out the backside of this. In a few months, things will come back. It's interesting. None of the major airlines have furloughed any pilots. And from what I understand, there's no plans to. They know that this is going to come back. I just watched a town hall with our CEOs, and I don't want to put words in their mouth at United, but basically the gist was they know this is going to come back. They want to be ready for it. And we're going to be. People aren't going to give up flying. We've become a culture where it's nothing to fly to Denver for a wedding, just for a weekend. Whereas, 30, 40 years ago, people didn't do that kind of stuff. Now flying is very much a part of our culture. It's interesting, a week or so ago, I was hearing people talk about, oh, these meetings are great. You can do it all online. And now I'm starting to hear people say, it's just not the same as being in person. And that's true. There's going to be a return to aviation. It's going to happen sooner than we think. So with that, to answer the original question, if your goal is to be an airline pilot, don't let this fixation on something that's very short term impact the rest of your life. I'll be an airline pilot for 41 years by the time I retire. This is something that we might look back and talk about, but you know what? We don't really talk about 2008 anymore. And there will come a point in time where this is kind of ancient history too. So if your goal is to be an airline pilot, get out there, start your training. When things turn around, and I bet it's sooner than everybody thinks, you're going to be in a position to get to the airlines.
Well, thank you for sharing that insight with us. At this time, we will answer any questions that you guys have for Chris. Now, keep in mind, Chris is a United Airlines pilot. He does contribute to Airline Pilot Life, but If you have questions that are specific to the admissions process, we would encourage you to reach out to our admissions team to be able to get the best and most current answers from them. So we did receive one via email, and this is from Jack. He mentioned, my father is a pilot with NetJets, and speaking to him, it seems like all the major incidents that have affected the airline industry, 9/11, 2008 recession, now COVID, they haven't really impacted the private or fractional ownership industry. Do you agree that private industries have less to lose during major incidents? Also, as a prospective pilot who is looking to get into the career pathway, oh, that's awesome, Jack. Which avenue of the airline industry do you feel has the most growth in the coming years?
Okay, so two questions here. Yeah, the first one is, in economic downturns, do the fractionals like NetJets, FlexJets, the corporate aviation world, do they go through the same experience as the airlines? I would say no. It does seem like those kinds of industries are I don't want to say immune, but more so than the airlines are from this. The bottom line is it takes a lot of money to be able to hire NetJets. That's somebody that has significant income, and they're probably still going to have significant income in an economic downturn. There's people, I don't want to speak for people, but broadly speaking, those industries always seem to thrive. In fact, I was actually just talking to a NetJets pilot the other day, and I asked him how his business was. He said it's doing great because people want to be on the small airplanes with people they know,
Mm.
and avoid the big hubs right now. So it does seem like NetJets, FlexJets. I know there's several others out there too. Like they do seem to do pretty well all the time. There's also, to kind of touch on this, cargo is something that we often don't talk about, but FedEx, UPS doing really well right now. Those are highly desirable jobs to get, and I think they'll still be. Look, everybody's still buying everything on Amazon. Well, it comes on an airplane, and of course, there's other cargo carriers as well, like Atlas and Coletta. There's definitely growth in those areas. We've become a global economy. Things get shipped all over the world, and they need to do so expeditiously. That takes airplanes. Um, Now, the second question was, where do I feel will have the most growth in the coming years? I'm going to stick with the airlines. I think that we're having a little bit of a hiccup now, absolutely. But as I mentioned before, we're such a culture where people fly, you want to go all over the world. It's even, I fly all the time, and you know what? I still want to go places on vacation. That's going to come back, and people are going to fly again. The demand is projected to be huge for growth for the airlines in the next couple of decades. I think that's going to continue.
And looks like we have a couple of questions that are coming in. Charles wants to know, I know you talked briefly about family life on the road. Is it hard to have a family while on the road?
That's a great question. And now let's say I've never worked outside of aviation, and I grew up in an aviation family, but of course I know people that are. And well, yeah, I'm gone 14, 15 days a month. That's true. And I'm gone the entire day and the night when I'm gone. I also have 15 days a month generally off, completely off, where I'm home with my kids 24 hours a day. Versus you take your 9 to 5 businessman or woman, they have weekends off, and they're getting home at 6:30. So yeah, I do miss a few events here and there, but I also feel like in some ways I'm able to be a lot more present than if I was working a typical 9 to 5 job. So I haven't found it to be an issue. In fact, I think it's better. That's been my experience with it.
Okay. And scrolling through these. Oh, it sounds like Daniel has his instrument check ride tomorrow.
Good luck. Good luck.
Oh, best of success. He wants to know if there are any tips to impress the DPE. I mean, of course, we'd recommend you study.
I always tell people, everybody has their own method. I love that oral exam guide. I think it's red for the instrument one.
Yeah, we've talked about that.
Yeah, it's the best. It's got everything you need to know in there. Beyond that, I know everybody says it's so hard to do. I still get anxious for check rides, but relax, just try to be calm. That's really, in a lot of ways, what an examiner is looking for, is to see, are you calm under pressure? If flying is easy when nothing's happening. It's when things happen. How do you respond as a pilot to safely complete the mission? A lot of your check ride is going to be about that. So just try to stay calm.
But we wanted to say good luck on your, best of success. You'll do great in your check ride tomorrow.
Absolutely. Yep.
And then Eric was, Jason would like to know just your feelings on going through a flight school versus joining the military in order to get to the airlines. And obviously, this is something that plays off of seniority.
It does, but first, that's a great question, and it's a question we get asked a lot. And to me, you can't look at it as, okay, what's my best path to the airlines? If you're going to join the military, you need to do it because you want to serve and you want to serve your country. And flying is a bonus to that, then that's great. I'm not in the military, never have been, but from what I understand, growing up in Norfolk, in Virginia Beach, surrounded by Navy, it's a lifestyle. These people go out on boats for 6 months at a time. It is an absolute commitment to the country and to just doing whatever your country needs you to do. If you want to do that, I think that's great, and I really admire people that do that. But do it for those reasons. Don't do it to get free flight training, because I do know some people that have gone that route and they're miserable. They didn't want the lifestyle, they wanted the free flight training, and now they're not happy in the military. The military, I believe, and Ashley, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's a 10-year commitment if you're a pilot.
I think it actually, I'm not sure if it varies branch to branch now. I believe it is 8 for
Okay.
some branches.
Well, either way, look that up, guys. I'm not sure, to be honest, but let's say it's an 8-year commitment. That means that from when you start in the service, you've got to do 8 years before you can get out to be eligible to leave honorably, which of course you want to do. That's in 8 years that you probably could have gotten yourself to a major airline. And, that's a few, obviously not all 8 of them, but let's say 2 years on the back end. That's 2 years of being a captain making $300,000 a year that you're going to give up. So the people that go to the military, they're great pilots. It's a great education. I mean, you can't knock it, but they're usually 35 to 45, and they're my first officers as they join the industry. They'll never be that 777 captain flying to Tokyo, because they'll never have the seniority because they got hired later in life to do it. So take your pick. But again, if you're going to go into the service, do it because you want to serve.
And all right, looks like we have from Jacob. He would like to know what locations you think are best to train. So perhaps we can go over factors that play into that.
That's a question we get a lot, and I like it. It's a good question. I say they're all fine, and that's not just. Again, I don't work for ATP. I'm not in emissions, but they've been doing this a long time, several decades. They want to put a location someplace that didn't make sense. I've seen them move locations because maybe the traffic pattern was too congested, or there was some flight restrictions around the area. I tell people that location's there because it works. So pick the one that's most convenient for you, for whatever, family's there or you have a place to live. Go there. I want to give it any second thought to it. Look, it's a 9-month program. Every location is going to have bad weather at some point during those 9 months. It averages out. Whether it's Chicago and it's a snowstorm, which also gives you beautiful flying days in the winter too, or in Florida where you get the thunderstorms, particularly in the summer, it all averages out. Just pick the one that's most convenient for you and go there.
All right. And Logan would like to know, how do the majors decide when a new hire first officer gets placed, or as far as aircraft?
Should I say it again? It cut out.
How do the majors decide basically what aircraft new hire first officers are assigned?
Good question. So my class at Continental, we had 16 people, and they had, I think it was 6 757 slots, and then the rest were 737 slots. And the manpower planning had determined that there was a need on there for whatever reason. Senior pilots weren't bidding to the 757, so they needed to fill those slots. So then, as I said, seniority is everything, even within your class and in your date of hire. At Continental, we did it by birthday. So I was the youngest person in the class. I was the last to pick. I really wanted to fly the 757, and I ended up on the 737. I'm glad I did. I did 4 years on it that I really enjoyed, and wonderful airplane to fly. But it goes by seniority within your class, generally by age, and what slots they need to fill. Typically at a major airline, it's going to be your smaller Airbus 737. You're not generally going to see new hire pilots get anything like the 777, 787.
And what are the differences of being, okay, so this attendee would just like to know the differences versus cargo pilot, commercial, airline pilot, corporate. Is one better than the other?
Well, that's a matter of preference. But what's interesting is that the difference in education and training is really none. It's everybody has to get the same licenses, the same ratings, and from there you kind of go your direction. And I've noticed that when people come to that point, when they take that left turn towards the corporate world, a lot of them stay in that. They really like it. They like flying out to Aspen and hanging out for 4 days, and they don't really want to do the airline life. I like the airlines. I like the terminals. I like having 150 people in the back, having the flight attendants is, to prepare meals for you and all that kind of stuff. It's the airlines very much cater to the pilot. I don't really have any additional responsibilities beyond flying. So I think they're all great. As you become a pilot and you're hanging around the airport and you're exposed to airline pilots or to charter type pilots, you'll find out what's going to be a good fit for you.
And do you commute?
I do commute, and it's something that I recommend people don't do. Um, it's not that bad. I make it work. I live in Norfolk, and I have a home near South Bend, Indiana, and I'm based in Newark, New Jersey. And I make that commute. Generally, it's not that bad. There's about 5 or 6 flights a day from Norfolk to South Bend. I think we have one or two now. But I wouldn't recommend it because it takes time. The way, it's your job to make sure you're there. The company doesn't care where you live. You can live, we've had people live in South Africa. As long as you show up in Newark, that's all they care about. And of course, rested and all that. But it is incumbent on you to be there. And that means finding a flight that has seats on it and making sure you're there on time. So generally you see a lot of times guys coming in the night before or several hours earlier than their trip. I'd really recommend moving to base. The airlines have some pretty good bases now. So find something even within 2 hours of driving distance, be a lot less stress than commuting.
Right. Oh, this is actually from one of our alumni. I recognize this name. Hey, Patrick. Once people start flying again, how long do you think it will take for just the overall process of hiring to be restored? And obviously, at this point, this is anyone's best guess, but back to normal. And he was just asking about what would be the order that will take precedence
The
as far as current training, new hires, things like that.
the order, and Patrick, feel free to follow up on that. Are you asking the order of who will get hired at the airlines? I'm not sure.
I think he's probably just asking in terms of what will we see first? Will we see your recurrent training take precedence and then new hires?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, recurrence is the people that are at the airlines now are the ones that they need to continue to get things going. United actually just closed their training center for, I think, about a week to deep cleanse it because they don't want their employees getting sick either. So yeah, but it's only going to be a week, and then things will be back up and running at there, and it'll be recurrent and then new hire training. But they run concurrently. It's not like we do one or the other.
And then Patrick, looks like you have a follow-up question. I think at this point, we wouldn't want to advise on just that other question because we're waiting to hear. But as soon, I mean, as obviously as like Chris has said, and he can chime in here, how long will it take for new hires to get their foot in the door once hiring is restored? Is what his follow-up
I think
question was.
that's a great question, and I don't know, but it's one of the reasons that I say if you, and I guess Patrick, you're already an alumni, so you're in a great position. Get out there, build your flight time. You want to have as much as possible. Right now it's kind of been this race to 1,500 hours, and okay, you get my 1,500 hours, and I get hired at an airline. We might see that change to where they're looking at 2,000 hours, or somewhere in between. Who knows? But get out there, build your flight time. My guess, and it's just a guess, I'm not an expert. I'm a regular line pilot, but my guess is that it's going to be sooner than we think. Like once this is behind us, people are dying for the economy to start again, for travel to start again. People are ready. And I think we're going to see this surge come back once this threat of this disease is behind us.
And Patrick, one thing to think about with that is that graph we had before also for the mandatory retirements, those are still going to happen. So that's going to be a demand there. And looks like the next one, can you just explain the difference between line and reserve and a little bit of details about that? Everyone seems to have a different definition. Thanks for all the great info. Oh, thank you.
Well, yeah, you're welcome. And part of that definition is because it's different at every airline. Every airline has their own contract that's negotiated with the pilot group. Most airlines are unionized, so the union negotiates the contract. So you'll see differences within those. But line, in all my experiences, a line holder is somebody that gets their schedule usually a week or I get mine about 2 weeks before the month. So like on March 15th, I get my April schedule and I have my entire schedule for April. Usually that doesn't change. Now I can trade trips if I'd like, or maybe pick up or drop a trip. But generally I pretty much fly the schedule that I have. Now reserve typically goes to more junior people or people that live in base and close to the airport. And that means you're on call. You get paid a minimum guarantee. I think ours is 73 hours. Now remember, most line pilots fly about 85 hours, so it's not a huge difference. And basically, you're the standby. You wait for somebody to call in sick, for a flight to cancel because of maintenance or weather, any of the operational irregularities that the airlines have, go to the reserve pilot to fill in. So you get a call. I believe ours is a 3-hour call out. So from when they call you, you have 3 hours to be at the airport and you'll be ready to start your flight. Sometimes it's kind of cool. You get to do some neat things on reserve, like ferry empty airplanes around or occasionally test flights, things of that nature, or go to different cities. But most people prefer to be a line holder because they just like knowing where they're going, be able to plan a little better, and it's typically pays a little bit better too.
Okay. And Christy would like to know, did you take out a private student loan to follow your dreams to become a pilot? And if so, how was managing that loan?
I did take out a loan. I had to get a cosigner because while I didn't have bad credit, I had no credit. I was 23 at the time and just didn't have any credit history. So it was my mother co-signed for me. And it was a 15-year loan. And of course, things weren't quite as expensive back in 2004, but still had a sizable payment. I think my payment was somewhere around, I'll say $500 a month. I'm not entirely sure. And once I made the minimum payments while I was an instructor and as an express jet pilot. But once I got to Continental and I started making good money, I just doubled down on those payments and I paid it off in 7 years, which was a huge relief. So it's manageable. We get this question a lot too, and I say to people, if the banks didn't think it was manageable, they wouldn't give it to you. Because these are unsecured loans, guys. It's not like a car where if you don't pay it, they come take the car. There's nothing they can take back. So the banks they know what your future as a pilot is, including as a flight instructor, and they know that there's an ability to repay that loan. It might be tight. But most jobs start with kind of an apprenticeship type, few years before you get into it, and that's basically what being a flight instructor is. Actually, something you could speak a little bit to along that is tuition reimbursement and what a huge help that can be in people paying back their loans.
Definitely. So for the majority of our tuition reimbursement programs, if you were a flight instructor for ATP, an airline, if you go through and do a cadet style interview, then you're actually able to sign a contract a little bit earlier and commit to that airline and in turn start receiving additional compensation from the airline to help offset the cost when those first minimum monthly payments kick in and you have to start repaying the loan. And keep in mind, right now it's also a great time and that a lot of regionals are offering signing bonuses. So if you're smart with those funds, then you have the opportunity to really make a big impact on the principal balance on the loan to be in a situation to be able, even if you don't have the funds to necessarily outside of that pay a large sum of additional payments, you are decreasing the compound interest over time. So keep in mind those are options that that we recognize in the industry as opportunities to be able to make that more manageable and make flight training a little bit more cost effective.
And along those lines, I'm not an expert on this. The guys and gals in finance at ATP is particularly Kirk. He's the guy you want to talk to explain all this. He's phenomenal. But that tuition reimbursement can really help kick in those lean years when you're, a CFI and the pay is okay, but it's not great. And it can help get you through to the airlines to where that higher pay kicks in and, help make that payment. So I don't know why everybody's not part of tuition reimbursement. I wish they'd had it when I did it.
Is what are Hey Jordan, what are major airlines doing at the moment to mitigate their cash flow?
Well, great question. It's something that I touched on earlier, and really it's canceling flights. So what I've seen is, like I said, I commute Norfolk to Newark, and they canceled all but about one a day. And it makes sense. We still want to be able to connect people to those places they need to go to visit family, to go to the life events that have to happen. But there's no point in flying airplanes around that are losing money. So basically, cancellations and also putting giant revenue expenditures on hold. Things like new uniforms that were maybe going to be a couple $100 million for the entire employee group. Things that are extra to have, not great, like new airport lounges. I think you're going to see a lot of that being suspended for a while. They're stopping their stock buybacks too because of the CARES Act. So basically, any extra money, nobody's come to us for pay cuts yet. I don't foresee that happening. I really don't. I hope I'm right, but so far just managing the expenses.
Getting creative in Jordan, that's something that your airline has done very well. Even with Southwest used to design, that's why they have the ice cubes now that have a space in them or a hole in them to help with cost effectiveness of fuel.
Yeah.
So there are very unique ways out there, and there are very brilliant people that are able to um, find those cost-effective measures. Looks like we do have a couple more questions. Speaking of tuition reimbursement, yes, guys, right now, obviously for the tuition reimbursement, you do have to go through a cadet style interview. So with most of the regionals, the hiring is on a pause right now, but we have not been given any indication from our regional partners that this is something that we see going away anytime soon. Right now, it is just a temporary pause until the regional airlines are able to resume all of their hiring, which most of them there's limited hiring, if any, as far as the pilot positions, across the board, and even other positions. So we still see that continuing, and looks like we get a couple questions on that.
And that's a good point, guys. I think things are on pause right now. I don't think this is going to be some giant turn the world upside down kind of event here. I think we're all on pause waiting to see what happens. What's not on pause are those airline retirements that we showed earlier. Those are continuing, which is going to continue to drive programs like tuition reimbursement.
Right. And Logan would like to know, what is a good number of hours that the majors look for?
It's been a
Or
while.
maybe you can even speak to experience overall and what some of the criteria.
Yeah. Well, first thing is an undergraduate degree or better to the person that had the graduate degree. But they definitely want an undergrad degree. And that's just to show that you've got commitment. You're able to follow through on 4 years. The caveat to that is the flow throughs to American Airlines don't require those. However, bear in mind that means you're limiting yourself to only work for American Airlines. American's a great company. I've got an uncle that's a captain there. There's no reason you wouldn't want to go to American, but you also probably don't want to limit yourself just to that. So 4-year degree, that's the big one. That's what separates the most people out. And I'd say of the first officers that I'm flying with, most of them have about 3 to 6 years in at a regional right now, probably around 4 or 5,000 hours. I'm not basing on anything scientific. That's just kind of an informal. I'm talking to the new hires that I fly with. But yeah, we do see people that have been at regionals longer. A lot of that was choices. That for whatever reason, they were comfortable there. They were captain. They had a great schedule. They had young kids. They wanted to stay. So we do see the older set coming over. But I'd say 3 to 5, maybe 6 years at a regional.
And Sam says that he has heard rumors of the retirement age being raised to 67. Do you even see that as a possibility?
I'm not an expert on that, but I can tell you when the age changed from 60 to 65, there was real rumors, like coming from the union, coming from the FAA, and it took an act of Congress, literally an act of Congress, to change that age. There's been none of that now. I think a lot of that might be wishful thinking from the 63, 64-year-old crowd of pilots out there that want to keep flying. But no, I haven't heard anything definitive. And whenever I've asked that question of people that are actually experts, like aviation medical examiners or union reps, it's not in the works. To my knowledge, it's not on the FAA's radar anywhere.
Perfect. And how did you choose Continental over all the other airlines?
Well, we always say that the best major is the one that hires you. And, Continental hired me first. It's funny. Growing up, I thought I'd be a U.S. Air pilot, and my father was U.S. Air. I just kind of followed the same path. When I would think about being a pilot, and even once I began my flight training, that was kind of my intended destination, if you will. But then I ended up getting hired at ExpressJet, which, as I mentioned, was Continental Express back then, and I really liked the culture at Continental. The routes that they had, the airplanes that they had were great, and they called me for an interview. I did have some connections there that helped a lot, but I don't know. It was as fine for Continental Express. I got to see Continental firsthand, and it really seemed like an attractive place to work. And United is the same way. It's a great culture, great corporate culture. Everybody kind of working together, and I like that. And I think a lot of that came from Continental.
Andy would like to know, he is currently in his first year of college. Would you recommend me to enroll in my local flight school first, then enroll at ATP?
Well, that's what I did, Andy. I got my private. I think that if you have your summers off and you think you can do it in those 2 to 3 months, that's a great way to go about, especially if you're unsure. And, I wasn't 100% sure that I really wanted to be. One of the reasons I got my private outside of ATP, because at the end of the day, I could say, okay, I spent 10 grand or whatever it cost. And, it's not for me, but I have my pilot license and I can go fly on weekends. So it was a way of kind of testing the waters without committing. I think it really depends on you and how committed you are. I will say that there is an ATP way of flying. They've been doing this for a long time. They have procedures that they've honed over decades and decades of practice. And coming in with my private from another school and from only having flown with one instructor, I had some bad habits that I picked up from him. And it's funny, a lot of people only want one instructor, and that's not how the airlines work. You're going to fly with several people. And if you come to ATP, you won't have several, but you'll have a few along the way. That's really good. That's different experience, different people, different techniques of teaching. I had some bad habits I had to unlearn. So, if you have the summer to get a head start on it, that's great. If you're also using that time to save money to pay for it, then I would say wait. But it depends on you and how certain you are of it.
Stephen, his location right now is shut down, or they're not able to conduct training due to coronavirus. So maybe he's in one of those locations where there is a county or statewide mandated closure of certain businesses. So he wants to know if you think it would be best to temporarily move locations to continue training so that he can get into the seniority pool faster, or if he should just wait until his location reopens.
Buddy, like seniority is everything. And it depends on how easy it is for you to move to that location. If it's something you can easily do and there's no impending risk of that location being shut down, yeah, I probably would. I mean, we don't really know when this is going to end. And the sooner you can get out there, start building that flight time, like I talked about, the people with the most time, they're the ones that are going to get hired. Just depends on how much of a trek that is for you and if you're able to easily do it. If it's an easy move, yeah, I'd be all over it. Keep flying. And the other thing is your skills aren't going to get rusty like they are, waiting.
I think we've already answered this, but David had asked, he's looking to enroll at ATP in October with a private pilot. Is it still a good time to enroll in a flight school? And I think both of our resounding answers is yes, but I'll let Chris again describe that in a little more detail.
Yeah, no, I think so. Like I said, guys, this is temporary. And, the fact that you already have your private is great. You already know what you're doing. Yeah, there's none of these things we've seen, '08, even 9/11, none of it had, I don't want to say it didn't have a big impact. They all had big impacts, but not a career killing. People still went through training. When Adam and I went through training, it wasn't such a great time. The airlines hadn't been hiring for a while, and we went through, we got ready, and boom, here we are. We're both at major airlines now. So yeah, I would say go ahead and start. Okay, guys, if it's your dream, go out there and do it.
And Patrick is starting with us on April 27th. So welcome, Patrick, with Credit Private. And I guess this is a question. Okay, so this is again about tuition reimbursement and Aviate and the Envoy Cadet program. Yes, as discussed right now, some of the programs have restricted the interview process, but if there is an application, I still, because there's a couple questions about this, still encourage you, if the application is live, go ahead and apply. Again, seniority is everything on those too, because you do want to be able to get that cadet style interview out of the way and complete that to be able to move on to the next step to be eligible for tuition reimbursement. And Patrick also said, thank you very much for your time and your answers on all of the Airline Pilot Life forum posts. Chris?
You're welcome. You're welcome. Hey, those of you who are thinking of starting the program soon or maybe signed up for it, if you've been on Airline Pilot Life, you know what we always say is take those writtens now if you have time. The FAA written exams, get as many of them done as you can before you start flight training. It'll be a huge relief for you in the program. Now, would I push back a start date to accommodate that? No. The program's meant to be done and to have the writtens completed during the program. But if you have the time, knock them out, get them out of the way with. It'll be a huge relief.
And maybe a little off topic. No, it is not. And this one is from Anonymous, so we don't have the name. But what is your favorite aircraft to fly?
I think it's a great question. They all have things about them that are positives and negatives. I will give you my favorite, but we'll say like the Airbus, I didn't like the side stick at first, and now I love it. I love not having the yoke in the way. You got this great tray table to do your paperwork on, or even to eat. The 757 is probably the most capable aircraft I've flown. We have the Rolls-Royce or have the Rolls-Royce engines on them. Very powerful airplane relative to what we're asking it to do. You can just do anything you want it to do. It's a great airplane to fly. I gotta tell you, my favorite's the 737 though. I never flew the MAX. I flew the 300, which was a round dial, what we'd call it a classic with the old-fashioned instruments. And the 500 EFIS, which was kind of a mixture of the two, and then the 7, 8, and 900s, which are glass cockpits. And just a great workhorse of an airplane. It doesn't break. It's reliable. It does what it needs to do. It might take a lot of runway, but it'll get you where you need to go, and just a very reliable airplane to fly. And I really enjoy flying the 737.
And this is a follow-up question from the same poster. So this is something I think, Chris, you and I had discussed too, just with the current situation and hiring, and he or she would like to know, how do you feel about and then how do you feel that the outlook will be as far as the regionals with resuming hiring?
Well, of course, what the regionals do is largely driven by the majors, but the majors can't function without the regionals. Like I mentioned, I commute out of Norfolk and South Bend, neither one big cities, particularly South Bend, right? But it's the people that get on that 50-seat airplane in South Bend that then fly to Chicago or to Newark that fill the 777 going to Tel Aviv. So we're absolutely dependent on the regionals, and I think that when everything kind of starts up again, I believe we'll see them hiring too.
All right, and this last one, this is, do you think that the Hyperloop will ever take over air transport?
Tell you, I'm not sure what that is.
So we were provided with a follow-up. So I think that's what Tesla is working on, and the speed the ability to travel at 700 miles per hour. Do you think that it can take over the aviation industry?
Well, yeah, I'm guessing this is kind of maglev related, maglev trains, and forgive me if I'm wrong on that, but It's funny. I remember hearing about maglevs for years, and no, I don't. The difference is to fly from New York to Los Angeles, I only need 16,000 feet of infrastructure. 8,000 feet in New York, 8,000 feet in LA to land. A train needs, what, 2,300, however many miles are in between these two of track and infrastructure to run. And we're talking something that's incredibly expensive to build mile for mile. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I don't see it anywhere in our lifetimes.
Well, it looks like we are actually approaching our hour. So um, just want to say thank you, Chris, for joining us today. Thank you for all of our attendees. If we didn't get a chance to answer your question, I will capture them, and looks like some of them are more geared towards our admissions team. So I'll have them reach out and get in contact with you guys. And thank you again to everyone that tuned in this week. Next week, on Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern, we're going to be speaking with Rebecca Crone. She is the president and founder of Corporate and Career Takeoff, and she's going to discuss writing an effective pilot resume. So if you guys are getting close to that time of wanting to secure either your first job, be it as a CFI or with a regional airline, or even with like some answers, if we have anyone on here that's approaching the transition to a major, we will have her again on Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern. And thank you, Chris, so much for joining us and for all of your expertise today. And everyone have a wonderful week and weekend, and fly safe.
Great. Thanks for having me,
Thank
Ashley.
you.
Good day.